tune into me, you watching Gully TV. I'm here with a New York City legend. You're a local legend now. You're a national legend.
That's what they say.
Yeah, you far from domesticated. Yeah. Tell me about the origin of your name. Of course, you have a very, very unique name, and I know there's some history behind it.
Yeah, my father's a 5%er, and I was born as God Shammgod. His name is God Shammgod, and the origin of my name means Savior to thyself, one who's worthy of greatness.
Savior to
thyself, one who's worthy of greatness. So, I know in the beginning it was like kind of like confusion with people. You know what I'm saying? Because when I turned like 8 years old, my pops got arrested. I went to jail for a long period of time, and at that point, it was like friction because I just felt like, he didn't have to do the things he did and leave us. So when I started getting in school and stuff, being that I went to private school a lot and stuff, like a lot of people didn't want to call me God.
Right.
So, and then it wasn't really like a big thing to me at that point because, it was a lot of stuff, going in with my pops, like in the beginning, learning all my lessons, all my mathematics and things like that. And, it was kind of like tough because I wasn't like the normal kid. My pops used to train boxers. He trained like Mark Breland and stuff like that. So, my whole beginning childhood was like more physical. Like I used to wrestle, used to be in karate.
Okay.
I was born in Brooklyn. I lived on Utica and Union. Then I lived in 630 Gates. People know about that. It's like a lot of Trinidadians, a lot of Jamaicans. So I grew up around that type of environment.
Gotcha.
And so in the beginning, it wasn't even nothing about basketball. I used to get up early in the morning, read books and stuff before I went to school. It was kind of like on the same way how you see, where it's more glorified, you see like, kind of like the same situation, like Tupac was like raised like
I was
coming
raised
up.
in the Nation of Islam. I know exactly what you're talking
about. So it was like me being a part or a direct descendant of the nation. I remember I used to be at the dinner table and I used to have to read my homework out loud and stuff like that. And I remember when I turned 7 years old, I had the universal flag. For people that don't know what it is, I can show you what it is. I had the universal flag, but on the universal flag it say, in the name of Allah, it didn't say God Shammgod at the bottom. Okay. It's like a small pendant. And I remember I went to my cousin's house, and we outside in the backyard playing, because I never really got to go outside and just play a lot. So I went to the backyard and went outside playing, and my pendant fell in the grass. And I remember like being scared to come in the house to be like, oh man, I lost my universal flag. And when I told my pops, I remember he made me go back outside and look like the grass is like this much off the ground.
Right.
He made me look in the whole grass the whole night just to get the flag. That's how important it was to him, And so fast forwarding it, when my pops got arrested and stuff and went to jail, I moved to Harlem. My mom took us and moved to Harlem. And we moved to Harlem, moved in with like my aunts and them, and I moved on a block called 142nd Street. If anybody that's in New York, they know what that block, the block is called Crime Square, you know what I'm saying? It's like it was like a real rough neighborhood.
Right.
And that was like my first taste of like things being different for me, because when I was lived in Brooklyn is more like physical, more violent, more like aggressive.
Right.
Then I moved to Harlem. This was like the first time I seen like black people that was like stars, but they wasn't on TV.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So like, if anybody know about Harlem, Harlem is a place where, I'm not talking about the musicians and everybody that come to the Apollo, that speaks for itself.
Right.
But you had, hood celebrities that's like, that you hear about today in movies and things like that. And so when I first moved to Harlem, I'll never forget, I went to a school called PS 92. So when I went to PS 92, that was like my first introduction like into the world, because like the other part, when I was in Brooklyn, I was young, 10 and under, it's like kind of young.
Right.
So when I moved to Harlem, I was like, man, I was coming up here, kind of like, I want to say like a new lease on life, you know what I'm saying? Because in Brooklyn, I was getting in trouble. I was stealing. I was doing, kid stuff, like just a bunch of crazy stuff, hanging out late. And when I moved to Harlem, like I said, once I saw like how proud people was to be like black, and it was like the first time like all the stuff that my pops was teaching me was like manifesting right in front of me that I could see. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause I could see, Apollo, Sylvia's, I could see just stuff like
black
that.
greatness.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? If you look at like movies like Frank Lucas movie and things like that, Lenox Lounge and all those lounges, those famous lounges on the movies, I'm directly a part of that now.
Right.
So when I moved to Harlem, I was like, man, when I went to school, I was like, my mom's just holding it down. I'm just rocking like that. So what I did was, because in school you could write anything.
Right.
Like Speedy Claxton, name is not Speedy Claxton. You know what I'm saying? So when I got to school, I was just like, oh, I'm writing Shammgod Wells. Because my mom's last name is Wells, because my pops wasn't married.
Okay.
So his name was always Wells. So I was like, I'm just putting Shammgod Wells, I'm representing my mom's. You know what I'm saying? So what I did was I just like, I'll just put my last name as my first name in school. You know what I'm saying? So nobody never like really asked me, and it's weird because even like when everything later on changed, everybody's like, oh, he changed. I'm like my brothers and sisters always kept their name the same. I was the only one old enough to know.
So your brothers and sisters, they were Shammgod?
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. So, but nobody never really asked me because in the beginning it's not a thing.
Right.
It's not a thing until you manifest your talent.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like nobody cares at that point. Like my brother's name was always Prince Asiatic Shammgod. Even in the same school that I was in.
Right.
My sister's name was Shammgod.
But it wasn't no big deal.
But it wasn't a big thing because at this point I'm just Shammgod Wells. I'm just Shammgod. It's not, I don't have no real talent, nothing.
Right.
Because like I said, when I first got there, I was just into fighting and stuff. So then I met a guy named, I'll never forget, this was bugged out. I met a guy named Mase and Becca, right?
Right.
So for y'all, all y'all know Mase, from Bad Boy, it's like one of my closest friends, even to this day. It's like my brother. So I met him, and he was doing this thing. I went to the lunchroom, and it was him and this other guy named Chief, rest in peace, and they both was like good in basketball. So they used to do this thing at lunchtime where they get on one knee and just dribble the ball through their legs. Like when people first start practicing how to learn how to dribble. So Mase used to always be on one knee at lunchtime, dribbling between his legs. It's funny because I'm just thinking about this story now. I've never told this story. So he's dribbling between his legs. And I'm like, man, who is this kid? Because the whole lunchroom, everybody was like, digging him.
Right.
So the people understand, like, the person that they knew who Mase to become, he's always been that person, just minus the fame. Like, he always had people around him. People always loved his personality, everything. So he was, so then me and him got close. So he was like, yo, I'm gonna take you to see this game. And I was like, all right, cool. So like I said, I've never been on the basketball court to this point. Never in life, never watched the game, nothing. You know what I'm saying? Because as like you just said, it was more about my lessons then.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Learning my lessons and today's mathematics, stuff like that. So that's what I was into. So I come to Harlem. He's like, hey, I'm gonna take you to see this game. So I'm like, game? He's like, yeah, basketball. At this point, I'm only thinking basketball come on TV. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I was like, oh, we going to Madison Square Garden? He's like, nah, it's a park, 155th Street. I'm like, 55th Street, like Record Park. You never heard of it? I'm like, nah. We go there. I'll never forget. So we go there, I climb on the tree, I'm sitting in the tree. It's not a regular tree, it's like the big branches, so I'm sitting in the tree. The park is packed, jam-packed. And it was MALLOY NESMITH and Mike Boogie, which is Mike Thornton, versus a guy named Master Rob. It was an all-star game. I'll never forget.
So Future is old enough to play against Master Rob?
Yeah. Okay. Future had to be like 17 or something like this time,
Forever young.
Yeah, so Future was like, so it's so funny because I tell them this all the time. It's like, what people understand, if it wasn't no Future, it would not be no Shammgod. no matter how much I went to a certain place, you know what I'm saying?
That's what's up.
And I need people to understand that, because at that point, like the NBA was probably coming on every Sunday, you know, ABC joints.
Yeah.
I was always in the streets, so I've never watched none of that stuff.
Yeah.
So Magic wasn't my idol, Isaiah Thomas, none of that stuff. So I go to the park, I see Future stands right in front of Mike Boogie. Mike Boogie dribbles between his legs, come down, do a pass, and my life changed from that day forward. You know what I'm saying? So I always tell him, I know I tell him this all the time, but like, if it wasn't for him, it would not be, I mean, he was like a superhero to me.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? It's even now, you know, and he'll be the first to tell you, like, anytime you see me, the way I embrace him is because even now that I'm older, when I see him, I see that person. You understand what I'm saying?
No doubt.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, between him and Master Rob, there's like the greatest basketball players I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I ain't kidding about no Magic, Isaiah, I ain't care about none of that stuff.
Right.
And then, so I used to always, so it was Mase, and Mase was cool with God bless her dad, Ali Mo, Black Widow. Right, so and Black Widow's from my block.
Okay.
So
that's my favorite street ball player.
oh, is it? Yeah, no, Al's a superstar.
Yeah.
So all of them was good. It was Al, Mase, Camron, who else was over there? A guy named Jerry